Hello everyone, Evil Spirit here, back with another video, because you know what, I only reviewed one game on this channel, and that was Geometry Dash, and as you can tell, I thought that game was great. So let's talk about something that's not so great. Today we're talking about an actual episode of a TV show. Well, yeah, I know, so weird, right? I review games and TV shows. Anyways, so this is SpongeBob SquarePants. I think everybody knows what SpongeBob is. It's going on to like its 12th season now, which I am not even shocked about because SpongeBob's been here for a while. But today we're talking about their most controversial episode of all time, One Course Meal. This video might be a little bit more angry than most other reviewers of it, unless you're talking about Mr. Enter, who, well, you know, he screamed in that review. Anyway, so let's get on to it. So this episode is technically about Plankton wanting to kill himself because he is traumatized about Pearl. If you don't know who Pearl is, well, I don't blame you because I don't think she's been in a lot of SpongeBob episodes. But technically, the characters in this episode, Mr. Krabs, is Pearl's father. So, there you go. That's really what you need to know. So, Pearl technically walked in. Okay, let me just start from the beginning, okay, before I get very confusing. But I think I already did that. But anyways, so technically the episode starts with Mr. Krabs in a money bath, which, you know, I didn't expect different. So, when Mr. Krabs comes out whenever he smells something, turns out to be an ambush by Plankton. Wow, how original! Am I right? So anyways, technically, Plankton just attacks, and he actually gets Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob, which is technically really almost the first, I think. I don't really remember any other episode where he was very, very, very close to getting it, other than Plankton's Army from Season 3. But, whatever. Anyways, as the episode goes on, however, Pearl walks into the Krusty Krab to ask Mr. Krabs for some money. Obviously, Plankton, being the epic gamer that he is, he gets scared because she's a girl. Sorry, gamers, didn't mean to make a joke, okay? We're cool, and we know it. Anyways, technically, Plankton gets scared of Pearl, and let me just add one thing to this. Remember that episode, The Algae's Always Greener? You don't? How do you not remember that? I mean, it's a very classic episode. But one thing from that episode was Plankton interacting with Pearl for the first time. Don't you guys just love continuity? And I get it. There's a bunch of episodes that don't follow continuity, like Squidward being afraid of ghosts, Squidward knowing Sandy, Mr. Krabs knowing Sandy, Mr. Krabs being afraid of ghosts, Patrick's rock being destroyed a couple thousand times, SpongeBob's house being destroyed a couple times, Squidward's house being destroyed a couple times, Squilliam existing, Bubble Bass existing. But technically, Mr. Krabs knows that Plankton would be scared, so he kind of traumatized him by saying, like, oh, you better watch out, she's pretty hungry, her. This obviously scares Plankton, making him actually do a pretty funny joke of walking into the freezer and then leaving. And I just love Pearl's reaction of, did he just walk into the freezer? He walks out, oh, sorry, wrong door. But yet, this is where the episode starts derailing. You see, Mr. Krabs starts telling Pearl, like, that he would pay her to get Plankton. Really? I mean, I get it, Mr. Krabs and Plankton aren't the best of friends, but they were the best of friends. Again, I know continuity ain't the biggest thing in SpongeBob, but still. Remember that good old episode, Friend or Foe, where they were friends? Yeah, remember that? And how even though Mr. Krabs does hate Plankton, he doesn't want him to die or anything. So this episode just destroys Krabs' character, which doesn't shock me because every episode of SpongeBob now technically destroys a character. Pet Sitter Pat destroyed freaking Patrick's character. Good Neighbors destroyed SpongeBob characters. The Splinter destroyed Patrick's character. And Smooth Jazz Bikini Bottom destroyed Patrick's character. Do you guys see a trend? Patrick is technically all these episodes. But don't worry, we'll rip him a new one in the next episode review. Because honestly, I have a lot to talk about him. Because honestly, he does take me off to the point of no return. Now, Mr. Krabs is technically asked Pearl for a dress. And you might be thinking, okay, that's weird. Well, it gets weirder. Which I'll talk about later because that's kind of a spoiler. But honestly, if you've seen the episode, you probably know. And I'd be shocked if you didn't see this episode. It's been talked about everywhere. But anyways, a traumatized Plankton is at home scared, tells Karen, and Karen, being the good-hearted wife, ignores it and leaves. Now, this happened to a lot of people, and I don't really think this gets brought up, but ignoring someone who's been traumatized is kind of horrible. I mean, I get it, sometimes they do it as like a joke, and maybe they're just messing around, but I hate when parents and shows do this. It just ticks me off, man. I mean, think about it. Your husband, who's been with you most of the time, is traumatized because of a freaking monster that could possibly eat him. Again, I'm no marine biologist, but the person who used to write the show, rest in peace Steven Hillenberg, by the way, was a marine biologist. But you know what? I don't know how I can even say this without getting even more mad. But shouldn't Squidward also be scared of Pearl? Shouldn't everybody really be scared of Pearl? She's a whale. She eats things. Hey, there's even sharks in some episodes. Why is no one scared of that? Why is no one scared of sharks? Sharks are carnivores. Because if it's the case that technically Pearl can eat plankton, which we don't know, doesn't that also mean that sharks can eat fish? Does that mean that freaking any nematode can technically get fried and eaten? Does that technically mean that SpongeBob can technically just dissolve one day? Probably, I mean, that makes sense. But doesn't that mean that Mr. Krabs could get eaten by Pearl? Could that also mean... Okay, I'm getting off topic. But what I am trying to say is, this is a point that never gets brought up. Can Pearl technically eat SpongeBob and Patrick and all of them? Or can she only do it to things that she's drawn to? She says that she's not a fan of plankton because she prefers a salad, but I mean, does other whales? And at the end of the episode, I'm going to bring up this point again, so bear with me. So anyways, as Plankton takes out the trash for his beloved wife, oh god, technically, Pearl's there and scares him. Technically, getting more and more scared, Plankton stays in the chum bucket for a long time. And guess what? He's fully broken. Broken to the point of suicide. This is an episode of a kid's show, by the way. I expect this stuff from my favorite show, Steven Universe. Because Steven Universe, in my opinion, as one of the best shows ever written. And I swear to God, if a lot of people disagree with me, I'm going to beat you up in the comments. Okay, I'm sorry. Anyways, I'm just saying this now. SpongeBob is technically... I don't know. I'm just saying that this is a kid's show. Not an adult party cartoon like Ren and Stimpy. Not a kid's show but has adult themes in it like Adventure Time, regular show, or even, as I said before, Steven Universe. It's not even an adult show like Family Guy or The Simpsons. It's a kid's show. It's not supposed to be so dark. And I get it, there are dark humor. Like, I mean, that kid from the episode Hooks who got swooped away by a fisherman. Yeah, that's dark, but it's kind of subtle. But this ain't. Plankton walks out and lays on the road saying, alright, that's it, I'm done. Pie Guy Rules actually kind of brought up a good point. Why didn't the writer just have it where freaking Plankton decides to go in and get eaten by Pearl, but it turns out to be Mr. Krabs, which, spoiler alert, I warned you that was going to happen. Plankton was getting scared by a fake crab. Anyways, technically, Plankton was getting scared by Mr. Krabs because SpongeBob told him. Now, I'm glad that this show knows that SpongeBob is kind of well-hearted, but whenever SpongeBob first finds out that Plankton's going to kill himself, and then he talks to Krabs about it, guess what? Guess what he asks? He says, he's a mess. Again, kids show. And I get it, this is season 7. We're already on season 11 to 12. But still, kids show. It doesn't even matter. Because even though that SpongeBob is a kids show and has dark humor, the writers don't care. By the way, one of the writers was the voice actor in Plankton. Hopefully your voice doesn't hurt, Doug! Anyways, let's continue on with this episode before I start getting a hernia. Or a migraine, or even a tumor. Yeah. Anyways, so technically SpongeBob tells Mr. Krabs this, Mr. Krabs laughs, and SpongeBob says, like, don't you just feel bad at least? And like, why don't you go out there and try helping? And maybe you should stop being a total jerk. Mr. Krabs brings up the point that SpongeBob told Plankton where the Krabby Patty formula was. Even though that he known, again, as I said before, from Plankton's army. Also, it's mostly in your safe. It's mostly in your safe. Heck, there's even an episode where you freaking took it to a different location, and guess what happened? Guess what happened, Mr. Krabs? Plankton knew where it was going. I get it, SpongeBob timeline or whatever, and no continuity or whatever. Doesn't matter. There were so many episodes where Plankton knew. How? How can characters be like this? Also, Plankton could technically just go to the Krusty Krab and steal a Krabby Patty, a frozen Krabby Patty, mind you, and take that. He knows where the freezer is. He walked into it in this episode. So technically, he knows where everything else is. Technically, all he needs is the Krabby Patty secret formula, which time and time again was only meant for the patty. He knew where the freezer was, so why don't you just get the frozen patties and hide it somewhere else if you're that scared? Which you never even think of Plankton as a threat, Mr. Krabs. So why would you even tell SpongeBob that technically it was his fault that this mess started? The episode ends with Plankton finding out. He goes in, traps Mr. Krabs, puts a mime in front of him, and guess what? Instead of Plankton actually feeling happy and just leave, letting Mr. Krabs be tortured and then everything go back to normal, instead it ends with Plankton getting more traumatized and leaving the Krusty Krab because of a projector show that SpongeBob showed him where there's a bunch of whales outside. This episode is disgusting. I can't even comprehend how Doug Lawrence, the voice actor of SpongeBob, for criminy sakes, man. I mean, jeez, couldn't you at least make it a little bit more funnier? At the least, took Pie Guy's rules joke idea instead of having him lay out in the middle of the road. This episode's bad, okay? Possibly one of the worst episodes of SpongeBob out there. There might have been like one or two jokes that actually cracked me up. Like, just the beginning, how funny it was that SpongeBob was shooting peas and technically Plankton blowing up a bubble. It just all reflects off him. And then how Plankton just walks into the freezer, I thought was funny. Yet still, this is a very bad episode, and I recommend people not to watch this episode. Don't watch it at all. Stay far away from it. In my next episode review, I'll be talking about Pet Sitter Pat, so rest in peace my voice because I'm going to be yelling a lot. Thank you all for watching. See you guys next time.